desire to invest in a state? And then would you say that people can only transcend that desire to invest in one state and then identify with the whole process themselves through training?
Oh yeah, well through experience and training, yeah, because I mean, think about it this way, it's like you guys just don't have enough life to figure everything out for yourselves. You know, forget it, you can't do it. Life's too complicated and you're too short. Your life is too short and you're not that smart, you know, and so unless you have guidance, obviously, people have to be socialized. You know, they have to be socialized or they're just ruined. The question is, what's the end product of the socialization? One is, well, nihilistic totalitarian, you know, the other is the person who has one foot in order and one foot in chaos. And that's a better place to be because the world isn't just order and it's not just chaos.
So then given that this training was that if our scientific conceptualization of the world has underwritten our wisdom traditions such that we're not getting that training, would you default to the stance that over time it would compound towards?
Well, I think that's what happened in the 20th century, and that's what we're going to take a look at. Like part of the I talked to you guys about Nietzsche and his announcement at the end of the 19th century. You know, okay, so what he was announcing is, oh no, our new mode of thinking has invalidated our old modes of thinking, and that's not. It's like a mass. It's like a murder of the most valuable thing you can imagine. That was his perspective, and then his observation was, look out, because when something of that magnitude dies, there's a big void, and something's going to take its place. So what took its place? Well, it's pretty obvious. I mean, communist totalitarianism took its place. That was pretty much half the planet. We haven't quite, you know, scrapped all the problems that were associated with that. And then there's widespread nihilism and like a pathological form of relativism. So, and for Nietzsche, those were the two options. It's like, where else do you have to go? Well, that's what happened, and it wasn't good. And I think, you know, it's like, one of the things that Viktor Frankl said about his clients, his clinical clients, and Frankl was a psychiatrist who'd been through the concentration camps, you know, he said that very frequently the problem that his clients came to him about was the problem of meaning. It's like, I think, who was it that said, he opened his book, I think it was Camus, the only philosophical question worth posing is, why not commit suicide? Now, it's a little on the depressing side, but if you ever talk to someone who's thinking about committing suicide, I'll tell you, they can come up with some pretty comprehensive answers for why that's a reasonable thing to do. And you know, you just don't leap there from happy to suicidal. You have to go through a lengthy process of determining just exactly why suicide is the appropriate option, you know, unless you're tremendously impulsive. And so to me, it's like, if we lose our grounding in history, given that we're historical creatures, and if we lose the proper sense of identity, then we're either going to be weak or dangerous. Those are the options. And if you're weak, you're dangerous. And if you're dangerous, you're weak. So like, you know, either way, it's not good. And I also think, and this is skipping ahead in the class a lot, is to the degree that you think that existence is unbearable because of its meaningless structure and its implicit suffering, it's going to be a big chunk of your psyche that's wandering down genocidal and apocalyptic lanes. Because if it's pointless misery, why not put an end to it? And you know, if you don't think that people are trying to figure that out all the time, you're just not paying any attention, because people are trying to figure that out all the time. So, and if you read the Brothers Karamazov, I think, is the best example of this. You know, Dostoevsky has a figure in the Brothers Karamazov whose name is Ivan, and Ivan's a pretty vicious character. He's smart as can be, he's good looking, he gets along well with people, he's, you know, he's debonair, suave, and he's a committed nihilist, and he has rational arguments to back up his nihilism, like, that are the most powerful ones Dostoevsky could invent. And so they're powerful enough, like, he's done as good a job as anybody needs to. And he puts forth a vicious argument for the pointlessness and essential immorality of existence. Well, maybe he's right. Maybe not. That's the question. So part of what I've been trying to figure out is, how could it be possible that Ivan is wrong? And if so, why? And that's what I'm trying to tell you, is that These things that we think of as archaic superstitions are not theories about objective reality, and they're not archaic, and they're not superstitious. And not only that, you already live by their dictates in one form or another, whether you know it or not, and the old stories are perennially attractive to you, and you need them. You can't live without them. So what I'm trying to do, what I've tried to do, is to figure out how they can be true, while still allowing the other things that we know as modern people to be true. So that's what we're trying to figure out. Other questions?
Okay, like the actual stories themselves, you're trying to think of how can like the religious stories be true?
Yeah. And what it means for them to be true. What that means. Because one of the things we've been doing over the last 3 weeks is thinking, what does it mean for something to be true? That is not a simple question. And one idea is that theories about the objective world are the only form of truth. But that's not, first of all, that can't be true. Because your problem is how to act. And you might say, well, that's not a real problem. It's like, at that point in the discussion, then we start talking about what's real and what isn't, right? It's such a deep question that the nature of your term starts to become important. And I would say the most important question that you have to answer is how and why to live. And you might think, well, that's an epiphenomenal question. It's like, well, I don't think it is. And I don't think there's any evidence that it is. I think it's a proposition that it is. And I don't think it's supported by the facts. And that's what you're going to be trying to figure out while we go through this course. So, other questions? And if any of the things if I say don't make sense, please tell me, because I know that it's a complicated thing to try to explain.
So I have a question about the use of the word religion, because at least in the context of the class, it's kind of a structure of beliefs to use in the world, but actual religions, maybe lowercase r, capital R, I don't know, have a whole dogma that goes with them, and people can take that more literally as in the objective world of the subjective.
Yeah, the dogma is just the dominance hierarchy.
So
Everything has a dogmatic structure. That doesn't mean it's right. I mean, religions are generally made out of forget about religions. Belief systems have a dogmatic element and a transformative element. And they're always at war. Because the dogmatic element constrains the revelatory element, and the revelatory element undermines the dogmatic element, but they're both necessary. So it's a form of dialogue. It's the best way to think about it. There's got to be a dialogue in belief systems between the structure and the process of updating the structure. And any belief system can err too much one way or the other. And the only way that you can figure out if you're erring is by paying attention and communicating. So, and if you want a definition of religion, well, that's not a straightforward thing to do, but I would say that you have axioms of belief. And your axioms, whatever they are religious entities for you, whether you know it or not. Because you hold them as absolutely true. And you have insufficient evidence for anything. So, this is a Kierkegaardian idea. You are by necessity a creature of faith. And the reason for that is, there isn't much of you and there's a lot of the world. And so you have to make assumptions in order to move forward. And you might think, well, I don't make assumptions. And then I would say, well, when you cross the street, you're making an assumption. The assumption is that the other side of the street is a better place to be than this side of the street you're already on. So that's an assumption. Maybe you're going to get hit by a bus as you cross. So much for that axiom. But you just can't move forward without making assumptions, because if you question everything all the time, then you're paralyzed, you're in chaos. So